Crooked Timber of New India. Subtitle is Essays on a Republic in Crisis. Is very evocative of the contents of the book. And I was struck by the clarity of the essays that constitute this book. Most of the major issues that have come to the fore have been dealt with, analyzed with clarity and an exposition that is extremely accessible. These essays have been published in various places. They have been revised in some cases. Some were unpublished. Some of the essays were unpublished, and there's also contributions to this particular book in the form of essays. And these are chapters of the book. First, I'll ask Dr. Prabhakar about the title, the metaphor, the crooked timber. Could you give us an insight into the origin of this title? Yeah, you don't need this, I think.
Good evening, everybody. Let me say this. It's a great honor to be here in the Roja Mutaya Research Center and Library, especially today with Ram. I do not know if Ram knows or not, but to me and a lot of people across the country, Ram is a hero. And to be sitting with you and talking about my little small work is really overwhelming. And as they say, such things don't come alone. They come, and we have a PTR also here. And I'm a great admirer of the way he presents issues and the gusto with which he defends certain positions. And I'm really honored to be with all of you today. Ram, I have stolen this phrase, the crooked timber, from Immanuel Kant, whom I've been reading him for quite a while, and this particular thing has stayed in my mind for a long time. He says, from the crooked timber of humanity, nothing straight could ever be made. That's his usage. I thought that the kind of crooked timber that we see today in New India, nothing straight can ever be made. And I didn't go to the extent, but a friend of mine suggested, would you suggest that it should be hived off? Yes, it should be hived off. There is no alternative to this. You can't really straighten this crooked timber. And when I suggested this title to my publisher was a little concerned, in the sense he was doubtful whether this would really be understood by the general reading public, and they might mistake it for a book on timber trade. But I stuck to my guns. I said no, it would, because it's very plain, it's straight. And when they see crooked timber and New India, they would automatically, people connect to this. I must say, Ram, at this stage, as when you see a movie, when you read a novel, the writer invariably tells us that, look, the characters are fictitious. Any resemblance to
Yes.
the real life characters
It's coincidence.
it's only coincident. Now, when I said the crooked timber of New India, some people got agitated, but it's coincidental. I did not mean it that way. But if somebody wants to really own up the crookedness and try to become defensive about it, I can't really help.
The story about what your publisher said reminds me of what the writer R.K. Narayan once told us about the title of his novel, The Financial Expert. He said a sort of glorified moneylender who had never read a book in his life bought 100 copies and sent it. He had a firm and sent each copy to various people in his firm because he had become quite big by that time, and then realized that there was no expertise was involved. But whether it really happened or Narayan made it up, because he's that kind of writer, I can't say. But it reminded me of that. But coming to the uh, organization of this book, I said that it has great clarity. So my first thought was, why was it not written in terms of just chapters rather than a collection of essays? Because it lends itself beautifully to that organization. You dealt with various key issues that have come to the fore. They're capable of being organized into this. But I guess the answer was there is a certain integrity and a certain voice that belongs to the period in which you wrote these, namely between early 2020 and late 2022, right? So it stands out. That's the answer, and many were adopted or written for your video blog, Midweek Matters. Prabhakar is a well-known public intellectual, apart from being a scholar, an academic, because he takes his ideas across on different platforms. The common theme, the running theme here, running through these essays, as you say in the introduction, is that India's inexorable drift towards becoming a republic with highly compromised secular, liberal, plural, democratic credentials. Highly compromised. How compromised are we? At what stage of compromise or erosion of these credentials?
I'll give you a real life situation. When I contacted some publishers and told them that I have a book to be published, they were very enthusiastic. Then, as any publisher would ask you to send you a few samples of your work. So I did. And then, Ram, nobody would call me back. They wouldn't answer my emails. They don't take my calls. And after a long time, one or two of them get back to me and say, "Sir, we have a long queue waiting list. Many things are in the pipeline because of the pandemic. Are you in a hurry to publish it? Can you wait?" I said, "I'm not in a hurry to publish it. I can wait." Then they said, "Can you wait until 2024? I don't know why you laugh. I said, "I'm not in a hurry, but then I can't wait until 2024. Then I said, I was a little, wanted to be a bit more compromising and said, are you telling me that you're going to publish it in 2024? They said, no, we are not committing now, but we will consider in 2022. Then I got the point. I said, no, I can't wait till then. So this tells us to what extent our diverse, liberal, secular, democratic credentials are compromised. This is my real life situation. You see, somebody asked me some time ago, you published this book and you're safe. Yes, the day before I was in Ahmedabad. I just told PTR and Ram about my experience there. We have to keep in mind one important point, that is, democracy is not finished off in one fell swoop these days. That was in 70s, 60s, 70s, the coup and, army and army officers used to move into the presidential palace, arrest the, incumbent president or the prime minister, capture the radio station, television station, and then announce the martial law. It's not that anymore. It is a slow, inexorable, probably even unnoticed kind of a muzzling of the freedoms. Gradually, slowly, you won't even realize. That is the situation we are in. And I'm very worried about it. That is the reason why I have been writing. Since you are here, I must tell you one more thing. In 2019, I wrote a piece on the state of the economy. I was a bit critical because I was concerned. I was not critical of anybody, but I said, look, look at the credit offtake, look at the rural distress, look at the falling growth rate, look at the unemployment, look at the inflation, price, etc., etc. And then I sent it to a very prominent newspaper, supposed to be a very courageous newspaper. I don't want to name that newspaper. But they sat on it. In 2019, they won't publish it, but they won't tell me that they're not going to publish it. So I waited and waited and waited and waited. For almost 3 weeks, I waited. And then understood that they were not going to publish it for whatever reason. So I sent it to the Hindu and it was published. So what I'm concerned about, the compromise nature of our democracy or liberalism or pluralism, etc., has been there, and everything that I wrote in this book was informed by these experiences. It's not as free as we all would like to think it is. It is not as free as we are told that it is. It's no more.
In characterizing this process, which started a long time ago but gained momentum in the 1990s, you have written on this with great clarity, the different stages. When do you think did the process become irreversible? We are talking here about the process which gained momentum, what you call irreversible momentum, since the BJP, led by Narendra Modi and Amit Shah, came to power in 2014. But much of the groundwork had been laid in the 1990s, and perhaps starting even in the late 80s, with the Ram Janmabhoomi agitation, the propaganda about conversions, the threat to the Hindu Samaj from within, and to some extent even the question of, quote, infiltration mainly from Bangladesh, of what they meant. In Assam, it was any Bengali, Muslim or Hindu, but to the BJP and company, it was Muslims who came from there. So, is there a danger of underestimating the toxicity of what happened under a liberal facade, namely the Vajpayee government, where the real principal ideologue was Mr. Lal Krishna Advani? Are we overestimating the the strength and power of the present dispensation? Because, as you say, it's a very gradual process, and we need to understand this transformation. You can say this is the second coming of Hindutva, perhaps, but the coming of Hindutva on center stage hasn't been properly understood.
This is a very troubling question. I tried to think about this, applied my mind to this. Let's see what used to be the discourse.
Can you hear?
No, I'll use this. How is it now? Not bad. No bad.
Can you hear?
Somebody will have to help me.
Yeah. இது ஆஃப் பண்ணுவாங்க.
It's better now. I think it's too much. Ram, what stands out to me, the kind of transformation in the political conversation that used to happen, that's happening today. Now, how it transformed. BJP, for a long time, most of you would remember, used to time and time again say that we are also a secular party. We are also secular, but not like them. We are not an appeasing secular. We are genuine secular. We are genuinely secular. And today, what is the political discourse? I'm also Hindu, but not like them. Now look at the transformation. How did this happen? Today, there are political leaders who would say, we are also Hindu. I go to temples. I fast for 9 days on such and such occasions. But I'm not politicizing my Hindutva, my Hinduness. I'm a Hindu, not like them. From I'm secular but not like them to I'm Hindu but not like them. That is the major transformation that has occurred in the Indian political discourse, which came about, it took decades. If you want me to put a date, I probably will not be accurate, but I can tell you what my sense is. No, actually, for this kind of an ideology to flourish, the most fertile ground was immediately after partition. Thousands of dead bodies from the other side of the border into India, and some thousands of dead bodies on the train to Pakistan, and thousands of people in the refugee camps in and around Delhi. These leaders are nobodies actually, compared to the kind of leaders you had in the late 40s and 50s and even 60s. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee, Guru Golwalkar, Balraj Mathok, Swami Karapatri ji, people like that. But these forces could not rear their heads.
That's a puzzle, you say.
That's a puzzle. To a large extent, to some extent, significant extent, Gandhiji's murder also would have contributed. All right, but that wasn't enough for me. But after that, somehow the mainstream political platforms in the country have become complacent. They've become election fighting machines who are active during the elections and completely inactive on the ideological front between elections. They have nothing to do from one election to the other. They were just sleepwalking from one election to the other. In between, there is absolutely no. And everybody started doing business with. And I remember very well, for a long time, you mentioned Lal Krishna Advani. He used to say, "We are not untouchables. There should not be any political untouchability. We are also elected like you are elected. So don't treat us as untouchables." But if you look at it over the last 3-4 decades, every political platform in this country, except one or two, have done business with them, have been in their support, participated either from inside or from outside the government. They were part of the cabinets. So it was normalized. People like, the liberal face or liberal projection of Atal Bihari Vajpayee, etc., probably would have helped. But then people have missed. Even 2014, if you recall, the main plank of the BJP and its prime ministerial candidate then was fighting against corruption. Fighting against corruption. Against policy paralysis. Development. And I remember very well the prime ministerial candidate in his electioneering, he used to time and time again say the fight is not between Hindus and Muslims. But the fight is between Hindus and the Muslims on the one side and poverty and unemployment on the other side. That's the fight. So they smuggled themselves into the government, into the power, using not what they're implementing today, but something else, development, corruption, etc., etc. And then once the purpose is served, all these little things were thrown out. As I mentioned, the actual payload is Hindutva. All these other things are they were jettisoned. As it is going up, each one, corruption is gone, unemployment is gone, creation of employment is gone, everything else is gone, but something else, what they had in mind, stays. That is put into the orbit today in the Indian political situation.
You make it very clear that the Modi Shah BJP works with two advantages. And I quote, one, a knock-kneed opposition. Two, the coming to fruition of decade-long grunt work put in by the Hindu supremacist RSS and its many Parivar organizations, which have never really accepted our constitution. And you go on to say that the second became possible and went on unchallenged, largely because the political forces that are wedded to the founding values of our republic had not sized up, that's very important, had not sized up the menace posed to those values by the long years of electorally unrewarding, quiet and arduous work that had been put in by the Sangh Parivar outfits away from the limelight of news cycles. I think this is a very important formulation in this book, a very important presentation of a set of ideas in this. Could you elaborate on this point? Because without understanding the evidence and the logic behind this, it'll be very hard to get a sense of what this book or this collection of essays are all about.
As I said, there's a gradual transformation that has occurred in the nature of Indian political discourse. How did this come about? As I said, the most fertile ground was in 47, 48, 49. That was over. And then still, the work to turn Indian mind into a communal mind, or what they used to call Hindus who are divided along caste lines should be united as Hindus. That has become possible, not just because of, the present Prime Minister or present Home Minister, or they're just enjoying the fruits of decades-long work. And here, we, as a matter of fact, we must recognize the hard work that is put in for decades by numerous faceless people who were willing to put in that kind of a work, who are motivated to put in that kind of a work without expecting electoral rewards, without expecting any, rewards in terms of positions or, power, wealth, nothing. They just went on working and working. And today's BJP is the beneficiary of those decades of, long work, arduous work that was put in. So much so that in 89, Rajiv Gandhi had to launch his electoral campaign from Ayodhya.
Right.
From Ayodhya, he had to launch his campaign. And today, what is the kind of there is somebody today who could rant against Mahatma Gandhi without being challenged. It's not it's not difficult to say that this land is Hindu land. It is for Hindus. It's not for everybody. It can be said today unchallenged, without really, thinking twice about this. It is possible. Even 10, 15, 20 years ago, it was not possible. Whatever you had in mind, there are some people who had in mind, for the last so many decades. But they did not have the intellectual courage or the political courage to come out openly and state these positions. Today, you're able to state these positions and also draw applause, draw appreciation. That is possible today. And all this, because Ram, you know very well, as much as anybody else, is that politics is not in a vacuum. It, after all, is a culmination and a fruition of social, economic, cultural, and other factors. If you remove these things, you can't talk about a political reality. Political reality is informed by these things. Today, instead of our constitutional values of diversity, liberalism, secularism, etc., some other set of values are informing our polity. And that is because of the, decades of arduous grunt work that was put in by hundreds and hundreds of cadre of the RSS.
But there are also state-based parties, for example, the DMK and even the AIDMK. We have put in a lot of hard work, grunt work at the organization level. Take the DMK, for example. It was out of power for several years, for 2011. But the work continued, and the present, our chief minister, M.K. Stalin, I think, was very much in charge of the organizational work. They kept it alive, and the same thing you can say for the AIDMK to some extent, that even after the passing of two tall leaders, M.G. Ramachandran and Jayalalitha, they continue to be a force. And there are similar parties elsewhere, which are often called regional parties. So to some extent, they are a counterweight to the otherwise unstoppable Saffron Brigade, the Hindutva forces or Hindu supremacist forces that are going on. Are they not? Is it not a very positive factor that they have kept? Because not all of, I think you can't say about all of them that they function only from election to election. So far as the Congress is concerned, I think that's true, particularly in this state where they, hardly any organizational work. So do you see this as a mitigating factor on the side of the opposition?
Forgive me, I have a mixed feeling about this. To a large extent, what you said is right. Some of these political parties
and PTR's this forum is
yeah,
very much a response to that situation at the ideas level and values level.
Yeah.
So
I would completely agree with you, provided they have not done business with BJP. They have not done business with BJP.
They've gone.
No, if they had not done,
your Faustian bargain.
Yes, if they had not, if they had said, okay, there's no room for you in Tamil Nadu. There is no room for you in Andhra Pradesh. There is no room for you in, say, Telangana. Maybe there is no room for you, etc., etc., some places. But I win it. I win this and give it to you. There is a problem there. If they had said, I won't let you enter here, I oppose you tooth and nail, I will win this, but I'll halt you. I don't want to do business with you. If they had said this, yes, I would 100% agree with you. That's the reason why I said I have a mixed feeling about this. They're clear, but probably most of these, I'm not trying to say, look, I'm very wiser than, all these big political leaders. And, it's after all, practical politics. They have to, they have to make compromises. And somebody had said politics is an art of making compromises and things like that. Yeah, all these are fine. But the point is this. The point is what I term as the Faustian bargain, where you are prepared to sell your soul to the devil in exchange for some kind of a little advantages.
And you analyze the motives, why they do it.
Yes.
And you share that with us.
Yes. For instance, look at the political parties. The political parties who would not allow this juggernaut to roll into these states, they would tomorrow strike a bargain with them and say that this is in the interest of the state, because we need to be friendly with the union government to get grants, to get railways, and to get investments and things like that. I'm not trying to say they're wrong, but this is what has happened. Now, today, in some places where they know that they can't enter, despite whatever efforts, at the end of the day, they are okay with it, because ultimately whoever wins here, would lend their support to us, wouldn't they? And it has happened, and it could happen. Therefore, Ram, in this whole narrative and this whole thing that's happening in India, I don't really put much in store in the wisdom of the political parties alone. The political parties, if the public opinion, if the civil society is very clear about these things, tell me which political party would dare to do business with these kind of forces? They wouldn't.
Yes.
But that has compromised also. Now, civil, for instance, look at Karnataka elections. In fact, my book was first conversation on the book happened in Bangalore one day after the Karnataka elections were declared. Results came out. After the results came out, results were declared. And everybody was upbeat, everybody was happy. And I said, maybe not to the liking of many people, is that, let's not prematurely celebrate those things, because after all, it was not BJP's government. The mandate was not BJP's. They've taken it over after a year or so. Now they've gone back to where they were in 2018. They're now sitting in the position as they sat in the position in 2018. But what concerned me and what concerns me today is this, that their 2018 vote share of 36% has not shrunk. And their hold more or less on the coastal Karnataka remained intact. Their hold on the Bangalore and surrounding areas more or less holds. So what are we celebrating? So the point that I was trying to make there was, one election, even if it is 2024, if the present dispensation is defeated, I would still think that at least another decade or decade and a half hard work among the civil society is important to see that this poison that is now in the country, which is injected, is completely excised from the minds of the people. And it's gone very deep, Ram. I can tell you at least one anecdote during our conversation sometime, but I can tell you the poison is so deep.
Yes. Here you dig quite deep, and I was fascinated to read your critical analysis of the Pew Research, the research they did on India, the survey. You criticized the methodology, but it is of some significance. The findings, for example, the proportion of people who say that being a Hindu, being a Hindu is you have to be a Hindu to be a real Hindu, at least in a civilizational sense, I guess, to be a real Indian. And you have to speak Hindi in order to be a real Indian. So there's fertile soil, presumably. And then I also was interested in your discussion of that drawing in the German humorous magazine, the rabbit and the duck. Which is quite fascinating. In fact, that could be a whole book in itself if you expanded the ideas. Could you share your thinking on that? That's why you say it's gone very deep, and yet there are some bright areas.
Ram, can you imagine that with this kind of a price rise, with this kind of inflation, and with this kind of unemployment, especially youth unemployment? Youth unemployment, I do not know how many of you are familiar with the data. I don't want to,
I think that's very important.
A lot of data. I want to, make this evening as prosaic as possible, not too much.
But the book is solidly backed by data, or what is used there. Yeah.
Our youth unemployment is 23%. PTR is here.
Can you hear?
You're able to hear? No?
You have to speak up, I think.
How is this now? Okay. Yeah. The youth unemployment today is 23%. Roughly 28.9, 22.9, no, 23, roughly 23.
Data source? Data from?
Data source. This is very important.
Yeah.
Data source. Government of India has no data. It has, the Prime Minister has some data. The Prime Minister knows how many times he was abused. Precisely. But not 90 times, not 85 times, not 92 times, 91 times. Precise data the Prime Minister has on how many times he was abused. But if you ask the government how many migrant labor died, how many COVID deaths happened in India, what is the state of affairs in terms of oxygen supply, what is unemployment, what is the labor participation ratio, labor force participation ratio. They don't have data. And I'm not saying this just like that because I didn't find it. The government ministers say this in the Houses of Parliament that they don't have data. So you have to now necessarily go to sources like the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, CMIE, or the other sources that we have. Or sometimes, normally the international organizations put out data which are collected from the governments, respective governments, because they don't themselves go out into the field and collect the data. So whatever the government of India gives them, they they formulate their conclusions, their observations on the basis of that, and they give it. But sometimes we also have, especially when it comes to growth rate, unemployment, poverty, and all that kind of a thing, they sometimes do their independent studies. One such independent study by the IMF, World Bank, etc., they give you youth unemployment. Youth unemployment, we are in the company of Ram, you'll be surprised. We are in the company of Lebanon, Syria, Iran. We are in company of illustrious company of these people, these countries. Bangladesh has 12% youth unemployment, half of what we have, slightly around half of what we have. All the demographic dividend, the so-called demographic dividend, is squandered. I don't know how many of you remember, but we had very catchy programs with catchy names. Stand Up India, Make in India, Skill India, Hello India, doubling the farm income, and all that. Because I don't have much to do, I go into the ministry's websites and their annual reports. And this government, even if it is a small achievement, they are very good at amplifying it and trying to, get a lot of PR mileage out of it. Today I tell you, please go home and have a look at, about skill development, about doubling of farm income, about Hello India, about Make in India. Not a single word in those respective ministries' annual reports also. They don't talk about it. They are meant for, 1 or 2 days of headline management. After that, all the programs, the catchy phrases, etc., they fall on the wayside. They're not bothered. Nobody is bothered about them. So demographic dividend is squandered. There's a massive youth unemployment, and there's a massive skill gap. You, I'm not talking about the skills of those people who are not employed. Even those who are employed, that's the reason why I say, Ram, if you've noticed, I say India's unemployed and the India's unemployable. Because you see, our skilling of our workforce is 5%. Let's not compare with Japan or South Korea, who are somewhere around 85%. Even among our peers,
among the labor force.
yes,
Yeah.
it's 5% is what? It's miserable. We don't train our people. And if we make in India, we have to consume it. Nobody else would bother to lift it. That's the problem. It gives us pain that that's such a huge resource, and they're very smart people, intelligent people. Just give them a skill. You're not giving them a skill. Instead, you're giving them a trishul in their hand. That's what we're doing. We are trying to, make them militants for a wrong cause, for a divisive cause, for othering. This kind of a thing is happening. And I don't have to, repeat this in front of this kind of audience who are very well informed that, the debt is, in the last 7 to 8 years, it's more than 100 lakh crores. And look at the kind of private investment, which used to be 30%. Now it's about 17 to 18% PDR. It's somewhere around that, 19%, maximum 19%. Even if you want to be generous, it's not more than 19%. This is despite all the captains of industry openly, publicly praising the government. But if you ask them to invest, they are not willing to invest. Now, I think Dr. Jaishankar told the parliament or somewhere last couple of days that so far this year, 80,000 people have relinquished Indian citizenship. 80,000 so far. And this has been happening every year, especially since 2014, year after year, not less than a lakh and a half every year. High net worth individuals are leaving the country. They don't want to invest here. Why? They say the government is very good. Why can't they invest? And this is in spite of the government leaders repeatedly pleading with the private sector, please invest. They are not willing to invest. This is the kind of state we have, and look at the inequalities. In 2014, Ram, there were 125 billionaires. Today, there are 145 billionaires. Are you not proud of it? Why are you laughing? From 125 billionaires, we are now 145 billionaires. We should be happy. Aren't we growing? But you're not happy. The reason why you're not happy is you look at the 85% of the population which is pushed into poverty. And a couple of days ago or last week, I think there was a flood of reports in all the newspapers that 415 million people have got out of the poverty. I'll come to that. I think that needs about 10 minutes of my time, of your time. I'll explain that to you. But this is the kind of the economy we are living in. And then, of course, we have these lynchings, we have these dog whistles, we have these economic boycott calls, we have calls for genocide.
Yes.
All these kind of things are.
On skilling, Mr. Modi, as chief minister, used to often speak about it. He's told me and others, he wouldn't give press conferences, but in interactions, that we are lagging behind countries like China in this. We have only about 500 odd skills. They have 10 times the number of skills. So it is not that he didn't realize the importance of it. But now the story is in your book. On economic issues, you call the present government, the Modi government, staggeringly, I quote, staggeringly incompetent. You want to say something about that?
I said staggeringly incompetent.
Yeah.
At that time, when I said that, when I wrote that, I couldn't think of a stronger word. It's worse than that. As I gave
Demonetization.
Can you believe that? Can you believe that? Even a voodoo economist will not tell you to go for demonetization, and the so-called economic gurus of this government, they said it's a strike against the black money. Ram, have you seen anybody holding black money in currency? Unless he has just taken, the bribe yesterday or day before, you don't find. And then what happened? What happened after months? 98.3% of the currency has come back. 99.3, sorry, I'm not 98. 99.3% of the demonetized money has come back to the banking system, and then the fresh notes were taken. What's the point? But then what did you undergo? The informal sector has completely collapsed. It was slaughtered. Even now it didn't get up. That is the kind of economic philosophy, that is the kind of economic wisdom that this government has displayed. And that is the reason why I said this is staggeringly incompetent in managing the economy. Not only in managing the economy, but in every other sphere of our public life. Except one thing, they are very good. We talk about the animal spirits in the economy. But this government is very good at summoning the animal spirits in the polity.
In the polity.
In the polity. Not in the economy. In the polity. And you can see it. You can see it in Manipur. You had seen a little of it in different places. But I'm sorry to say this, but Northeast is somehow not so much emotionally integrated with the mainland. We don't feel very much for what is happening in Manipur, and we don't bother to, our mainstream media also doesn't pay much attention and give much space and much time to these. Imagine if something like that, similar to that, happens in mainland India. Imagine. And I can tell you this, that if we are indifferent to these kind of trends that are happening today, that we see, a day is not far away when such things are going to happen in our midst. In 2002, it happened. I'm just fresh back from Ahmedabad, I can tell you.
There are at least three other important subjects being analyzed in this book. There's a fascinating logbook on our pandemic experience, what it meant for India. And I think that there could be a separate book expanded, because I think it's very important. Then there is the whole the attack on free speech, freedom of expression, other democratic rights. Also a chapter, also special reference to the control of the internet, the attack on digital freedoms, partly through the IT Act, Intermediate Technologies, etc., Act 2021, and subsequent amendments. But before that, why don't you take your 10 minutes on inequalities, which is a very important part of the book.
What the poverty data? I don't know. Most of you must have seen the recent report that 415 million people were, taken out of poverty. You've seen that. If you look at that carefully, almost all the newspapers, almost all of them, printed more or less exactly the same version, because it's a PTI dispatch. Most of them have not even bothered to edit it also. So therefore, if you read in one newspaper, all the other newspapers are identical. Number one. Number two, this is a UNDP study, supposed to be a UNDP study on multi-dimensional poverty index, which is very important. We have to understand the background of this multi-dimensional poverty index. Why did this come about? This has come about because in many countries, in many societies, somebody is earning 100 rupees today, and tomorrow they would earn 150 rupees or 200 rupees, let's say. And which means that, that segment of population or those families or that individual has increased their income. And then if it is slightly above the kind of poverty line, then you say they are lifted out of poverty. But what if they can't afford schooling? What if they can't afford healthcare? What if there is no transport to go around? What if they can't consume news? What if they cannot access television? What if they can't go for a cinema? What if they can't have access to a clean drinking water? What if they can't what if they don't have sanitation facilities, etc., etc. So there was a very a strong advocacy that income poverty itself or income itself is not sufficient. Along with income, you need to have all these in order. That is why it is called multi-dimensional poverty index. You need to have these also along with income. Then it's meaningful. Then you are really out of poverty. Just by, pushing 10,000 rupees into my pocket, it doesn't make me non-poor. there are people, creative people, who can take advantage of this. And we have taken advantage of this. And we means Government of India. When the formulation was income is alone not the indicator of poverty, but all these multidimensional things you have to take into account. What the recent report, there's a little sleight of hand here. It doesn't talk about income, if you notice carefully. It talks about road infrastructure, it talks about sanitation, it talks about electricity connection, etc. Say, and then say, between this year and this year, there's a huge amount of progress. Therefore, 415 million people have come out of poverty. Instead of saying, in addition to income, that is the spirit of the entire multidimensional poverty index. But we have taken that out because I see no way in which income of this section of people has increased. Because between 2019 and today, pre-pandemic, we have not, after pandemic, the kind of pummeling, the kind of drubbing that the Indian economy has received is staggering. We have not gone back to pre-pandemic level yet. When that is the case, I don't have to give a lot of details, but just, broadly, when we have not gone back to 2019, how is it possible that we were able to lift 415 million people out of poverty? One question. Another one related to this, allow me to say this. We are told that we have overtaken the UK economy. They were our colonial masters. They ruled from Fort St. George, all these places. And now we are a bigger economy than the United Kingdom, isn't it? Matter of pride, it is. If at all, if it really happened, if it actually happened. The point is this. Now, when in 2019, you have not even got back to 2019 level, how could you have overtaken somebody? Is it possible? I just want this house to understand, is it because we have grown or somebody else has shrunk? I do not know. Please try and get it. Try and understand. Try and find out what exactly has happened. How did we become the PTR should tell us, isn't it? How did we become the fifth largest when we have not gone back to 2019?
We have, how much time do we have? Huh? Let's say 15 to 20, if it's all right. Then it'll do justice. I won't go into all the areas dealt with on the digital economy and what they are doing to it, or the pandemic, except to point out, in the case of the pandemic, that the chapter has to be read. It's fascinating because it's like a diary. It's diaristic. It's like a journal. But again, one would say, can we say staggeringly incompetent? For example, the mortality numbers. I think I don't know the latest what they've released officially. Is it 600,000 people died of COVID-related causes? Of course, that's arguable. How do you define a COVID death or COVID-related death? But I wish to point out that in independent assessments, one done by the New York Times, another by The Economist, the ballpark figure was something like 5 million people So that's an area I think that has to be read. But the question I will select for a few minutes before we have a little, if you wish to raise relevant questions, I realize that many of you wouldn't have read the book or even skimmed it, but it's worth reading. And if we cover all aspects, there'll be less incentive to read the book, which I think is strongly recommended. But I will select one question, and then maybe we can have 10 to 12 minutes when others can ask questions or make comments if they like. And this, I think, is very important when you're thinking. And another concern that runs through these essays, this is on page 14 in the introduction, and I quote, "The crisis that the Indian Republic faces will not disappear with the electoral defeat of the Modi-Shah BJP, because that entity, however overpowering it might seem today, is not the fount of the crisis." I think that's an important formulation. The crisis is deeper, and the challenge to the Republic is much more formidable than what the Modi-Shah-led BJP per se poses. Today's knock-kneed opposition could be straightened and made to stand its ground and get its act together. Want to elaborate on that concern?
I do not want to sound pessimistic. I have a lot of reasons to be optimistic too. For a change. It is a knock-kneed opposition, I said, because it's not able to stand erect, stand the ground. Okay, there are efforts. Very heartening to see there are some efforts. But, these opposition platforms have allowed a free run to the present juggernaut to grow and amass huge resources, financial resources and power, manpower and all that. It happened because all the others were, very complacent. They didn't, as I said, they didn't size up the challenge. But you see, power rests on just about 38% of the popular vote. Because how our republic is configured, this had given a huge number of seats, dominant position in the central legislature. That's a different thing. But 62% or 63% of the popular vote is outside this spell. Therefore, there is a hope. One. The second point I would like to make in this connection is that the challenge is not as insurmountable as it seems. This dispensation is defeatable. And, in different parts of the country, we have seen this. Only when it comes to, the central legislature, you need to configure it in a different way. The response to the challenge has to be configured in a different way. And probably the wise men and women in the opposition conclaves, they might arrive at something, eventually. Let's see.
fight, if it is not unequal, and the kind of superiority that which is apparent today is neutralized in the form of making people understand what is the danger to the republic, to the idea of India, is not very difficult, but if it is a question of who has to lead and who is the main force and who has to become the prime minister, and if these are the things that bog down the already knock-kneed opposition, then of course we have a huge problem.
And India, it's a little step forward for India to come together. INDIA, the alliance.
Let us hope so. Yeah. Let us hope so. I do not know exactly, I do not know as much as you do, how this would pan out.
Nobody knows.
Yeah. But let's hope so.
In terms of values, that's important. And
one important thing is that, first of all, whether they come together or not, either together or separately, one resolve has to be made that nobody does business with these persons, with this disputes.
Faustian bargain.
That's very important. Even then, in that case, even if opposition unity doesn't take place also, there is a ray of hope. If nobody does business with them, then there is a huge hope, isn't it? But if they're not very strong in that resolve, then anything can happen. That is the danger. That's
so.
Yeah.
And thank you for to Sundar Ganesan and Paneer Selvam for presenting this on behalf of our guest as well as everyone here. We really appreciate the work of the Roja Mutaya Research Library. And if you had more time, I think you could have shown them around your resources. Thank you.